My name is Natasha Sterling, I'm 32 years old, and I'm standing in my childhood home watching my father throw my belongings out the front door while my mother screams that I'm a worthless failure. The muddy ground swallows my childhood photos as my phone silently buzzes with notifications about another $1 million deal closing. As I watched those memories sink into the mud, I realized my parents had no idea their failure daughter was worth $25 million. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from today. If you've ever been underestimated by your own family, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about turning pain into power. Trust me, what comes next will show you exactly why the best revenge is massive success. Let me paint you a picture of the Sterling family, because to understand why I kept my success hidden for so long, you need to understand the dynamics I grew up with. My father, Robert Sterling, 58 years old, spent his entire life as a factory supervisor. He ruled our home with the same iron fist he used at work, believing that his way was the only way and that success meant a steady paycheck and a traditional career. My mother, Linda Sterling, 56, dedicated her life to being the perfect housewife, but beneath that homemaker smile was a woman obsessed with appearances and what the neighbors thought. Together, they created an environment where image mattered more than truth, and conformity was valued above dreams. Then there was my older brother Michael, 35, the golden child who could do no wrong. From the moment he decided to become a doctor, he became the sun around which our family orbited. Every conversation, every family gathering, every proud moment belonged to him. His wife Victoria, 34, only amplified this dynamic. A social media influencer with 200,000 followers, she documented their perfect life while looking down on anyone who didn't measure up to their standards. Her favorite pastime was making subtle digs at my simple lifestyle, not knowing I could buy her entire wardrobe with what I earned in a day. My cousin Derek Morrison, 38, always lingered at the edges of family gatherings like a vulture. As a lawyer at a mid-tier firm, he projected success but seethed with envy at anyone who might be doing better. His mother, my Aunt Carol, 60 years old, worked as a real estate agent and thrived on gossip. She could spread a rumor faster than wildfire and took particular pleasure in embellishing stories about family members who weren't present to defend themselves. Growing up in this family meant constant comparison and never measuring up. When Michael got straight A's, my A's and B's were failures. When he got into medical school, my full scholarship for business school was dismissed as a participation trophy. My parents paid every cent of his medical school tuition, claiming it was an investment in the family's future. When I asked for help with my business degree, they told me to take out loans like everyone else. After all, what was a business degree compared to their son the doctor? The real poison began when I chose tech over a traditional career. In my parents' world, working with computers meant you were a basement dweller playing video games. They couldn't understand that technology was reshaping the world, that innovation was creating more millionaires than medical degrees ever would. Every family gathering became an exercise in humiliation. Despite being 32 years old with my own successful company, I was still seated at the kids' table during holidays, listening to my teenage cousins talk about high school while the adults discussed Michael's latest surgical triumph. For years, I played along with their narrative. When relatives asked what I did, my mother would jump in before I could answer, saying I was between jobs or figuring things out. If I tried to correct her, mentioning my startup, she'd laugh and change the subject, treating my business like a child's lemonade stand. The few times I pushed back, insisting my company was thriving, my father would boom across the room that I should stop living in Fantasyland and get a real job with benefits and a pension. The situation escalated 3 months before that fateful Thanksgiving. My parents called an intervention of sorts, sitting me down in their living room with concerned faces. They wanted me to move back home to get my life together. At 32. With a multi-million-dollar business. They painted a picture of me as a lost soul, frittering away my youth on pipe dreams, heading toward middle age with nothing to show for it. When I politely declined, explaining that my business was actually doing incredibly well, they exchanged those looks that parents perfect over decades of marriage. the looks that said their delusional daughter was beyond help. Michael fuel on the fire, spreading rumors throughout our extended family that I was living off credit cards, one step away from bankruptcy. He'd drop these poison pills casually during family calls, mentioning how he'd love to help but I was too proud to accept assistance. Victoria amplified these lies on social media, posting inspirational quotes about enabling versus empowering, with thinly veiled references to family members who refused to take responsibility for their lives. Her followers ate it up, never knowing the successful businesswoman she was subtly attacking could have bought her entire influence with pocket change. The seeds of destruction were being planted, watered with lies and fertilized with jealousy. They had no idea that while they plotted to save me from my perceived failures, I was closing deals that would set me up for life. They couldn't fathom that their biggest disappointment was actually their biggest success story. But secrets have a way of revealing themselves, and mine was about to explode in the most spectacular way possible. Thanksgiving arrived with the kind of crisp November air that should have promised new beginnings, not endings. I made a conscious choice that morning, sliding past my Tesla in the garage to take my old Honda Civic instead. The car had seen better days, with its fading paint and rattling engine, but it fit the narrative my family had created about me. I dressed simply too, choosing jeans and a basic sweater instead of the designer clothes hanging in my closet. This would be easier if I didn't provoke questions, or so I thought. The drive to my parents' house took me through familiar streets lined with trees dropping their last leaves. Each turn brought back memories of simpler times, before success created a chasm I couldn't cross, before I learned that sometimes love comes with conditions you never agreed to. I stopped at the wine shop and selected a bottle worth $300, a small indulgence that would probably be mocked as wasteful spending I couldn't afford. Everything I did was wrong in their eyes, so why start trying to be right now? I pulled into their driveway behind Michael's new Mercedes and Victoria's Range Rover, my humble Honda looking like a poor relation at the automotive family reunion. Through the dining room window, I could see the warm glow of gathering family, hear the muffled laughter that always seemed louder when I wasn't part of it. I took a deep breath, grabbed the wine, and headed for what would become my last family dinner. The moment I walked in, I felt the shift in energy. Conversations paused just long enough to be noticeable before resuming with forced enthusiasm. My mother rushed over, air-kissing my cheeks while her eyes performed a quick inventory of my appearance, finding me wanting as always. She took the wine with a small frown, holding it like it might contain poison. "Oh Natasha, you shouldn't have spent so much. We all know you need to be saving." The words cut exactly as intended, a masterclass in maternal passive aggression. Michael stood by the fireplace like he owned the place, which he probably would one day, regaling our cousins with his latest surgical success. Victoria hung on his arm, live-streaming the family gathering to her followers, careful to keep me out of frame. I was the family shame, not suitable for public consumption. Derek nodded at me with that thin smile lawyers perfect when they smell blood in the water, while Aunt Carol whispered something to my father that made him glance my way with disapproval. Dinner began with the usual Sterling family choreography. Dad carved the turkey while delivering his annual speech about tradition and hard work. Mom fluttered around making sure everyone knew she'd been cooking since dawn. Michael received the first and best portions of everything, the prince being served by willing subjects. I found my seat at the far end of the table, practically in the kitchen, between two teenage cousins who spent the entire time on their phones. The conversation followed its predictable path. Michael announced his promotion to chief surgeon, and you'd have thought he'd cured cancer from the family's reaction. Mom actually cried tears of joy while Dad stood to shake his hand, pulling him into one of those masculine hugs reserved for royal accomplishments. That's when he brought out grandmother's watch, the family heirloom that was supposed to go to the eldest grandchild regardless of gender. But rules bent for Michael, they always did. "You've earned this, son," Dad said, his voice thick with emotion I'd never heard directed at me. "You've made the Sterling name mean something." Victoria captured the whole moment for her followers, adding commentary about family traditions and the importance of honoring success. The comments poured in, heart emojis and congratulations for the perfect family moment that I watched from my exile at the table's end. When she finally put her phone down, she made sure to catch my eye, her smile sharp as a scalpel. I tried to shift the conversation when there was a lull, mentioning casually that I'd just closed a significant client. The words had barely left my mouth when Dad's fork clattered against his plate. "Still playing with computers, Natasha? When are you going to get a real job? You're not getting any younger, and those startup dreams won't pay for retirement." The table went silent except for Victoria's barely suppressed giggle. Michael leaned back, that satisfied smile playing on his lips as he watched our father dismiss my entire career in one breath. Mom rushed to fill the silence with questions about Victoria's latest sponsorship deals, praising her business acumen for turning selfies into income. The irony of celebrating one woman's success while dismissing another's wasn't lost on me, but pointing it out would only prove I was bitter about my failures. That's when Derek decided to strike. He'd been waiting all dinner, I realized, biding his time for maximum impact. Speaking of Natasha's work, he began, his voice carrying that false concern lawyers perfect in courtrooms. "I ran into someone at the Bellagio last week who mentioned seeing you there." "The casino," he added helpfully, as if anyone might confuse it with something else. "They said you were at the high-stakes tables." The truth was far different. I'd been meeting potential investors in the casino's Michelin-starred restaurant, closing a deal that would expand our operations internationally. But Derek had crafted his words carefully, painting a picture without technically lying, letting everyone's imagination fill in the damaging details. The explosion was immediate. Mom's hand flew to her chest in theatrical shock while Dad's face turned the color of the cranberry sauce. "Gambling?" Mom shrieked. "Oh my God, Robert, she's a gambling addict. That's where all her money goes." I was having a business dinner, I tried to explain, but my words were drowning in the tsunami of their assumptions. Michael jumped in with surgical precision. "That explains what my colleagues saw at the unemployment office last month." I didn't want to say anything, but he trailed off, letting the implication hang like a noose. The truth about that visit was equally innocuous. I'd been meeting with the department about our new initiative to hire veterans, offering training programs and guaranteed positions. But truth had no place at this table when the lie was so much more satisfying to believe. Aunt Carol delivered the final blow with relish. The Hendersons saw her at the food bank on 5th Street. They didn't want to embarrass her by saying hello, but they told me she was in line with. She paused dramatically, the homeless. I had been at the food bank, organizing our company's monthly volunteer day and delivering a substantial donation check. But in my simple clothes with no context, I understood how it might have looked to someone predisposed to think the worst of me. The table erupted in crosstalk, everyone suddenly having a story about my spiral into destitution. Each tale built on the last, creating a narrative of failure so complete that the successful businesswoman sitting before them ceased to exist. In their minds, I was already living under a bridge, stealing Wi-Fi to feed my delusions of entrepreneurship. Dad stood suddenly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. His face had moved past red into a purple that couldn't be healthy for a man his age. "You're 32 years old, broke, gambling away money you don't have, and lying to everyone about it." Mom stood too, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of sadness, I realized, but tears of rage at the embarrassment I'd caused them. "We're done enabling you, Natasha. If you want to throw your life away, you won't do it under our roof. Go live in the streets where you belong." What happened next remains a blur of motion and madness. They rushed to my old room, the one they'd preserved like a shrine to my childhood, and began throwing everything out the window. Photos, yearbooks, old stuffed animals, childhood awards, all of it sailed through the air to land in the muddy flower beds below. Victoria filmed the whole thing, narrating for her followers about tough love and enabling versus empowering. I stood frozen in the dining room, watching my past literally thrown away while my phone buzzed incessantly in my pocket. Each vibration was another notification about my actual life, The one they couldn't see past their prejudices, the one that would have shut their mouths if I'd chosen to reveal it. But I didn't. I watched them destroy the remnants of who I used to be, not realizing they were setting me free. Michael returned from the demolition, my laptop bag in his hands. He threw it at my feet with disgust. Here, maybe you can pawn this for food money. Or gambling. Whatever your addiction needs. The bag contained a computer worth more than his monthly salary, but to him, it was just another prop in my failure story. They actually changed the locks while I stood in the driveway, gathering muddy photographs and waterlogged memories. The locksmith, clearly uncomfortable, avoided eye contact as he worked. Neighbors gathered on porches, drawn by the spectacle of the Sterling family finally dealing with their problem child. Some looked sympathetic, others satisfied, but all would have stories to tell at their own Thanksgiving tables about the girl who couldn't make it. Mom approached one last time, her face set in lines of righteous determination. She held out her phone, showing me the text she'd just sent. "Don't come back until you have a real job and can prove you're clean from gambling. We love you too much to watch you destroy yourself." Victoria's livestream had attracted thousands of viewers by then, all cheering on my family for their brave stance. Comments flooded in about boundaries and tough love, about enabling versus helping, about the courage it took to let a loved one hit rock bottom. She ended the stream with tears in her eyes, the devoted sister-in-law heartbroken but supportive of necessary measures. Her follower count jumped by 10,000 that night. I loaded my muddy belongings into my Honda, each trip to the car accompanied by helpful suggestions from my family. Get help. Find a program. Consider rehab. Think about what you've done to us. Each word was another nail in the coffin of our relationship, though they thought they were building a ladder for my redemption. As I started the car, I caught a glimpse of them in the doorway, united in their intervention, convinced they'd done the right thing. Driving away, I allowed myself one look in the rearview mirror. They stood together, the perfect family minus their imperfect member, probably already crafting the story they'd tell others. How they'd tried everything. How it broke their hearts. How sometimes love means letting go. They had no idea what they'd actually let go of, but they were about to find out. I made it 3 blocks before I had to pull over, my hands shaking too badly to drive safely. Not from sadness or shock, but from pure, crystallized rage that seemed to burn through my veins like liquid fire. I sat in the parking lot of a closed grocery store, watching the rain that had started to fall wash away the mud from my retrieved belongings. Each drop that hit the windshield felt like punctuation to the end of a very long sentence. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since I'd left the house. I'd silenced it during dinner out of habit, that old training that family time was sacred, even when that family was tearing you apart. Now I pulled it out, seeing dozens of missed calls and messages. Not from concerned relatives, of course. They were too busy celebrating their successful intervention. These calls were from my other life, the real one, the one I'd hidden like a shameful secret. The first voicemail was from my CFO, David Chen, his usually calm voice tinged with excitement. "Natasha, I know it's Thanksgiving, but the acquisition just finalized. $8 million in profit, just like we projected. The funds will hit the account Monday morning. Call me when you get this. And happy Thanksgiving, boss." $8 million. While my family threw my childhood teddy bear into the mud, convinced I was destitute, I'd just made more money than my father had earned in his entire lifetime. The irony should have been satisfying, but it only fed the fury building in my chest. I moved to the next message. "Miss Sterling, this is James Morrison from Technova Industries. No relation to my cousin Derek, thankfully. I apologize for calling on a holiday, but our board met this afternoon, and we're very interested in discussing the acquisition of your software platform. We're prepared to offer significantly above market value. Please contact me at your earliest convenience." The calls continued, each one a reminder of the life I'd built while my family wasn't watching. The Forbes reporter confirming final details for their upcoming feature. My business partner announcing our company valuation had officially exceeded 25 million. The investment banker explaining that all preparations for our eventual IPO were proceeding ahead of schedule. Success after success, achievement after achievement, all invisible to the people who should have been my biggest cheerleaders. I drove the rest of the way to my penthouse on autopilot, my mind racing through possibilities. The building's valet looked concerned at the state of my car and the muddy boxes in the back, but professionally didn't comment. I took the private elevator to my floor, grateful for the solitude, though solitude had been my companion for so long it felt more like coming home than entering an empty apartment. My penthouse occupied the entire top floor of one of the city's most exclusive buildings. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the skyline, the lights twinkling like earthbound stars. The space itself was a study in understated elegance, nothing flashy or ostentatious, just quality in every detail. I'd bought it 2 years ago, paying cash, a celebration of my first major acquisition. My family had never seen it. They'd never been invited. I poured myself a glass of wine, the irony not lost on me that this single bottle cost more than the one I'd brought to dinner. Then I opened my laptop and began doing what I did best, strategizing. If my family wanted to play games, if they wanted to humiliate me publicly, if they wanted to cast me as the failure in their success story, then I would show them what failure really looked like. Or rather, I'd show them what success they'd been too blind to see. The first thing I did was check Victoria's social media. Her livestream of my humiliation had gone viral in our city's social circles. 60,000 views and climbing. Comments poured in praising my family's tough love approach, sharing their own stories of difficult relatives, thanking Victoria for her bravery in showing the raw truth of enabling versus empowering. She'd gained 15,000 new followers in 3 hours. I screenshot everything. Then I pulled up my parents' social media, normally dormant except for birthday wishes and holiday posts. But tonight, they'd been active. Mom had posted a prayer request for their wayward daughter, asking for strength to maintain boundaries with loved ones who'd lost their way. 200 comments of support, promises of prayer, and shared stories of similar family struggles. Dad, who barely understood Facebook, had shared Mom's post with his own commentary about the importance of hard work and refusing to enable laziness. I screenshot those too. Michael had been busy as well. He'd posted on LinkedIn, of all places, a lengthy piece about the difficulty of watching a sibling struggle with addiction and failure, how it motivated him to work harder and appreciate his blessings. He managed to work in mentions of his promotion, his successful practice, and his loving wife while painting himself as the long-suffering brother who'd tried everything to help. The post had been shared dozens of times, liked by hundreds in the medical community. More screenshots. Derek and Carol hadn't posted directly, but I found their fingerprints in the comment sections, adding details to the narrative, confirming sightings, expressing concern wrapped in gossip. They were vultures feeding on carrion, except the corpse they thought they were picking clean was very much alive and about to bite back. I sat back, looking at the evidence of my public shaming, and felt something shift inside me. The anger was still there, but it had transformed into something colder, more calculated. They'd made a critical error in their campaign against me. They'd gone public. They'd created a record. They'd involved their social circles and professional networks in my humiliation. Which meant when the truth came out, the fallout would be equally public and exponentially more devastating. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I wanted. Diane Walsh picked up on the second ring, despite the late hour. That's what you got when you paid premium prices for premium service. Natasha, darling, happy Thanksgiving, she purred, the city's most exclusive event planner always ready for her most valuable clients. Tell me you're not working on a holiday. Actually, Diane, I am. I want to plan an event. A charity gala for homeless veterans. 3 weeks from tonight. I could hear her mental calculations through the phone. 3 weeks was an impossibly short timeline for the kind of event I'd want. But impossible was just another word for expensive in Diane's vocabulary. That's ambitious, darling. But for you, we'll make magic. What's the occasion? Let's call it a giving thanks celebration. I want it next to the Sterling Country Club, at the Riverside Ballroom. Black tie, 500 guests, full media coverage. I paused, then added, and Diane? Make sure everyone in my parents' social circle gets an invitation. Everyone. Consider it done. Budget? Whatever it takes. I want this to be the event of the season. The one everyone talks about for years. We spent the next hour planning details while I gazed out at the city lights. Each decision was calculated for maximum impact. The date would conflict with the country club's annual holiday party, ensuring everyone would have to choose. The cause, homeless veterans, would make it impossible to decline without seeming unpatriotic or heartless. The mystery around the host would generate buzz that money couldn't buy. When I finally hung up, the framework of my response was in place. But this was just the beginning. My family thought they'd won tonight, thought they'd finally dealt with their problem child. They'd shared their victory across social media, made their stand public, invited the world to witness their tough love triumph. They had no idea they'd just provided the rope I'd use to hang them. I poured another glass of wine and raised it to the glittering skyline beyond my windows. Thank you, I said to the empty room, to the family who couldn't hear me, to the universe that had a sense of humor darker than my Merlot. Thank you for setting me free. Thank you for making this easy. Thank you for showing me that blood isn't thicker than water, it's just harder to wash off. The planning would begin tomorrow. The calls to lawyers, to media contacts, to every connection I'd cultivated while building my empire in secret. My family wanted to play pretend, to craft a narrative where they were the heroes and I was the cautionary tale. They were about to learn that in the real world, the one outside their bubble of delusion, money didn't just talk. It screamed. And I had 25 million voices ready to sing. The next morning arrived with the kind of clarity that comes after a storm, both meteorological and emotional. I woke in my penthouse bed, Egyptian cotton sheets soft against my skin, and for a moment felt the weight of what had transpired. Then I remembered the screenshots, the viral video, the public humiliation, and that weight transformed into rocket fuel. I had work to do. I started with coffee and a call to my lawyer, Elizabeth Hartman, who picked up despite it being Black Friday. That's what retainers buy you, availability. Elizabeth, I need you to review some social media posts for potential defamation. I'm sending you screenshots now. Give me 30 minutes, she said, her voice already sharpening with professional interest. Elizabeth loved a good defamation case like some people love chocolate. Initial thoughts? My family publicly accused me of being a gambling addict, unemployed, and homeless. They're wrong on all counts. The posts have gone viral in our social circles. Oh, honey, she practically purred. Christmas came early. I'll call you back. Next, I contacted Diane Walsh to confirm our gala plans. She'd already secured the Riverside Ballroom and had her team working on invitations. Darling, the buzz is incredible already. Everyone's wondering who's behind such a generous event. The country club is in a tizzy because half their board wants to attend your gala instead of their party. Perfect. The Riverside Ballroom sat directly adjacent to my parents' country club, sharing a parking lot. Every attendee would have to drive past the building where my parents held their membership like a badge of honor, where they'd spent years cultivating their image as successful, respectable people with a doctor's son and a disappointing daughter. The contrast would be delicious. Phase 1 of my plan required subtlety. I couldn't reveal myself too early or the impact would be diluted. Instead, I had my assistant create a shell organization, Sterling Hope Foundation, named with deliberate irony. Through this foundation, I began making moves that would only make sense in hindsight. First, the building where my father had worked as a factory supervisor for 30 years. It had been closed for 5 years, slowly deteriorating into an eyesore the city couldn't afford to demolish. I bought it through the foundation for twice its assessed value, ensuring the story would make the business pages. The plans I filed with the city were public record, a technology incubator for underprivileged youth, focusing on teaching coding and entrepreneurship to kids who, like me, were told their dreams weren't practical. The contractor I hired was Thomas Mitchell, the same man who'd turned down my parents' home renovation loan last year. They'd wanted to add a second story to keep up with the neighbors, but their credit wasn't quite good enough. Thomas had been apologetic but firm. Now he was effusive in his gratitude for such a massive project, promising to fast-track the work. I made sure he'd mention the project when he attended the country club's holiday party. Seeds needed planting. Next came Victoria's sponsorships. My company had been quietly acquiring smaller tech firms for years, building a portfolio that included a surprising number of lifestyle and beauty brands that contracted influencers. I'd never paid attention to this side of the business before, but now I dove deep. Within 2 days, I discovered we owned or had stakes in 3 of Victoria's top 5 sponsors. The contracts were ironclad, but they included morality clauses. Live streaming someone's private family trauma could arguably violate those clauses. I had my legal team review the footage. By Wednesday after Thanksgiving, Victoria's biggest sponsor had suspended her contract pending review. By Thursday, the second followed suit. She posted increasingly frantic content trying to control the narrative, but the damage was spreading. Comments began appearing questioning why she'd broadcast such a private family moment, why she'd profited from someone else's pain. The internet, fickle as always, began to turn. My brother's situation required a different approach. Michael prided himself on his surgical team, hand-picked nurses who'd followed him from hospital to hospital. What he didn't know was that the traveling nurse shortage had created a bidding war for experienced surgical nurses. Our portfolio included a medical staffing company that had been trying to break into the high-end hospital market. I authorized them to make offers that couldn't be refused. 3 of Michael's best nurses accepted positions at competing hospitals by week's end. 2 more were considering it. But these were just preliminary strikes, softening blows before the real reveal. The gala planning consumed most of my time. I curated the guest list personally, ensuring every major player in my parents' social circle received an invitation. The mayor, the hospital board members, the country club elite, local media personalities, everyone who'd seen Victoria's livestream or read my parents' posts about their wayward daughter. The invitations themselves were works of art, heavy cardstock with gold leaf, delivered by courier to ensure they couldn't be ignored. Aunt Carol received hers while showing $1 million home. Her client mentioned it, wondering if Carol knew who was hosting. Carol, unable to resist gossip, speculated wildly about secret millionaires and celebrities giving back. Within hours, she'd called everyone she knew, spreading theories and ensuring no one in their circle would dare miss the event. She was doing my work for me, beautifully. I also began phase 2, the strategic leaks. I had my PR team release just enough information to create intrigue. A mysterious benefactor. A young entrepreneur who'd made their fortune in tech. Someone who understood struggle and wanted to give back. Each detail was calculated to build a profile that would shock my family when revealed. They thought they knew everything about me. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The Forbes article was scheduled to drop 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, but I pulled strings to move it up. The photographer had captured me leaving my parents' house that terrible night, box of muddy belongings in my arms, tears on my face. But they'd also photographed me the next day at my office, standing before the wall of awards and recognition my family had never seen. The contrast would tell its own story. Meanwhile, my family was beginning to feel the pressure, though they didn't understand why. Dad's golf buddies were all talking about the gala, wondering if he'd received an invitation. He hadn't, of course. Mom's book club was aflutter with speculation about the mysterious host. Their neighbor mentioned seeing my childhood home featured in what looked like a professional photo shoot, though they couldn't imagine why anyone would be interested in the Sterling house. Michael called me 3 times that week, leaving increasingly frustrated voicemails. His surgical schedule was in chaos with the nursing shortage. Procedures had to be rescheduled, and the hospital board was asking questions. He needed to vent to someone, and despite everything, he still saw me as the safe option, the failure who'd be grateful for his attention. I didn't return his calls. Victoria's descent was more public. Her follower count plummeted as sponsors pulled out. She posted a teary apology video about respecting privacy and learning from mistakes, but it felt hollow. Comments asked why she'd monetized a family intervention, why she'd broadcast someone's lowest moment for views. She tried to spin it as raising awareness about addiction and enabling, but without the family's backing, she looked like an opportunist profiting from pain. Derek faced his own challenges. The law firm where he worked suddenly had concerns about his social media presence. Partners who'd been considering him for advancement questioned his judgment in publicly discussing a family member's alleged legal troubles without verification. In the legal world, reputation was everything, and his was taking hits from angles he hadn't anticipated. The senior partners suggested he maintain a lower profile while they reviewed his conduct. By the end of the first week post-Thanksgiving, my family was in full crisis mode, though they hadn't connected the dots. They attributed their troubles to bad luck, karma, or coincidence. They had no idea that every setback was orchestrated, every challenge calculated. They declared war without understanding their enemy's resources. Sun Tzu would have been appalled at their tactical failure. I stood in my office that Friday night, looking out at the city I'd conquered while they weren't watching. The Forbes article would drop Monday. The gala was 2 weeks away. Everything was proceeding perfectly, except for one thing. Despite everything they'd done, part of me had hoped they'd reach out with genuine apology, real concern, actual love. My phone had been silent except for Michael's self-centered complaints. They'd had a week to reflect on their actions, to see the pain they'd caused, to recognize their cruelty. Instead, they'd doubled down, reinforcing their narrative on social media, garnering sympathy as the family bravely dealing with a difficult relative. Mom posted daily inspiration quotes about boundaries and tough love. Dad shared articles about enabling versus supporting. They were building a monument to their righteousness, not knowing it would become their tombstone. I picked up my phone and made one final call. Diane? About the gala seating arrangements. Put my family's reserved table directly in front of the stage. The one marked Family of Honor. Yes, I know they haven't RSVP'd. They'll be there. One way or another, they'll be there. The pieces were in place. The board was set. In chess, the most satisfying victories came from opponents who thought they were winning right until the moment of checkmate. My family had played their opening moves with confidence, never realizing they'd already lost. The next 2 weeks would be their education in underestimating someone who'd spent years building an empire in silence. Class was in session. Monday morning arrived with the kind of media explosion usually reserved for celebrity scandals or political upheavals. The Forbes article went live at 6 a.m. Eastern, perfectly timed for the breakfast news cycle. The $25 million secret: how Natasha Sterling built an empire while her family wasn't watching. The headline alone was enough to set phones buzzing across the city. The article was a masterpiece of narrative journalism. It opened with that photograph of me leaving my parents' house, arms full of muddy belongings, tears visible even in the grainy night shot. But then it pivoted to my office, to the wall of industry awards, to the team of 200 employees who called me boss, to the portfolio of companies worth more than most people would see in 10 lifetimes. The contrast was devastating. The journalist had done her homework. She'd interviewed former professors who remembered my innovative business plans. Early investors who'd taken chances on a young woman with big dreams and been rewarded tenfold. Employees who spoke about my leadership, my vision, my ability to see opportunities where others saw obstacles. And through it all, a common thread: I'd done it without family support, without connections, without the safety net most entrepreneurs relied on. But the killing blow came in my own quotes. I hadn't mentioned my family by name, hadn't needed to. Success is sweeter when it's unexpected, I'd told the reporter. When everyone thinks you're failing, you're free to build without scrutiny. Some people need cheerleaders. I learned to be my own. The words were carefully chosen, but anyone who'd seen Victoria's livestream would connect the dots. My phone started ringing at 6:15 and didn't stop. Reporters wanting follow-ups. Business associates offering congratulations. Competitors suddenly interested in partnerships. But between the professional calls came the personal ones, the ones I let go to voicemail. Mom called 7 times in the first hour. Her messages evolved from confused to angry to pleading. Natasha, what is this? Why didn't you tell us? This has to be some mistake. Call me back immediately. By the 7th message, her voice had taken on a shrill quality I'd never heard before. This is cruel, Natasha. Whatever point you're trying to make, you've made it. We need to talk as a family. Dad's approach was different. He left one message, his voice controlled but tight. I don't know what game you're playing, young lady, but this ends now. You come to the house tonight, and we sort this out privately. 6 o'clock. Don't be late. Still giving orders, still assuming compliance. He had no idea his authority over me had ended the moment they threw my childhood into the mud. Michael's texts came in a flood. Is this real? Why didn't you say something? Mom's having a breakdown. This is insane. We need to talk now. The desperation grew with each message. His final text revealed his true concern. The hospital board is asking questions about my LinkedIn post. You need to fix this. Victoria's response was the most telling. She tried to delete her livestream, but the internet never forgets. Screenshots circulated with new context, the millionaire being thrown out by family who thought she was homeless. Her follower count, already damaged by the sponsor exodus, went into free fall. She posted a frantic video claiming she'd known all along, that it had been planned, that she was in on some elaborate family therapy technique. No one believed her. The local news picked up the story by noon. Local tech mogul's rags to riches story highlights family dynamics in the digital age. They'd pulled Victoria's livestream, my parents' social media posts, Michael's LinkedIn article. The narrative wrote itself, successful woman hidden in plain sight while family publicly humiliated her for failures that didn't exist. The afternoon talk shows had a field day with the drama. By Tuesday, the invitations to my gala became the most sought-after tickets in the city. Everyone wanted to meet the mysterious millionaire who'd suffered such public humiliation with such grace. Diane called with updates every few hours. The mayor's office called personally to RSVP. The entire hospital board wants a table. We're going to need a bigger venue. No, I said firmly. Keep it exclusive. Send regrets to anyone who wasn't on the original list. Scarcity creates value. What I didn't say was that I'd deliberately limited the guest list to ensure my parents' entire social circle would attend while they were forced to watch from outside. Every person they'd performed for would witness their exclusion from the very event they were desperate to attend. Wednesday brought the lawyers. Elizabeth had sent cease and desist letters to my parents, Michael, Victoria, Derek, and Carol regarding their defamatory posts. The letters detailed the false accusations, the financial damage to my reputation, and the potential legal consequences. They had 48 hours to remove all posts and issue public apologies or face lawsuits that would bankrupt them. The letters were delivered to their workplaces, ensuring maximum embarrassment. Dad showed up at my office building that afternoon, trying to storm past security. The scene was caught on multiple cameras. Robert Sterling, respected factory supervisor, being escorted out while shouting about ungrateful daughters and family obligations. Someone leaked the footage to the local gossip blog. By evening, it was trending on Twitter with hashtags like #BadDadEnergy and #ToxicParenting. Mom took a different approach, showing up at my penthouse with tears and a casserole, as if comfort food could undo years of emotional abuse. The doorman, following my instructions, politely refused her entry. She stood in the lobby for 2 hours, clutching her Pyrex dish, telling anyone who'd listen about the misunderstanding with her daughter. Building residents later described it as uncomfortable and desperate. The security footage made another viral moment. Thursday marked 3 days until the gala, and my family's desperation reached new heights. They tried every avenue to reach me. They contacted my business partners, who politely declined to get involved. They reached out to my employees, who'd been warned about potential family interference. They even tried to book appointments at the spa I frequented, hoping to ambush me during a massage. Each failed attempt added to their humiliation. In a last-ditch effort, they released a family statement through Michael's hospital PR department. It was a masterpiece of revisionist history, claiming they'd always been proud of my success, that the Thanksgiving incident was a misunderstanding blown out of proportion by social media. They painted themselves as loving parents victimized by a vindictive daughter who'd hidden her success for cruel reasons. The statement backfired spectacularly. Comments flooded in pointing out the contradictions with their earlier posts. Screenshots of mom's prayer requests for her unemployed daughter clashed with claims of always knowing about my success. Victoria's livestream betrayed any attempt to reframe the narrative. The internet had receipts, and it wasn't afraid to use them. By Friday, 48 hours before the gala, the family's social standing was in ruins. Dad had been asked to step down from the country club board pending review of conduct unbecoming a member. Mom's book club politely suggested she take a break from hosting duties. Michael's position as chief surgeon was secure, but several board members expressed concerns about his judgment and leadership. Victoria lost her last sponsorship and was considering legal action against my companies, not realizing that would only dig her hole deeper. Derek's law firm put him on administrative leave while they investigated his social media conduct. Spreading unverified claims about a family member's alleged criminal activity reflected poorly on their reputation for discretion. Carol lost 3 major real estate clients who cited concerns about her professionalism after the gossip she'd spread came to light. The Sterling family empire, built on perception and propriety, crumbled in less than a week. Saturday arrived with perfect winter weather, crisp and clear with a hint of snow in the forecast. I spent the morning at the venue with Diane, reviewing final preparations. The Riverside Ballroom had been transformed into a winter wonderland of silver and blue, elegant without being ostentatious. Each table setting cost more than most people's mortgage payments, but the effect was worth it. This would be an evening no one would forget. The media requests are overwhelming, Diane mentioned, consulting her tablet. Everyone wants exclusive access to you. The offers are substantial. No exclusives, I decided. Full press access to the event, but no private interviews. Let the evening speak for itself. What I didn't say was that I wanted my family to watch from afar as every media outlet in the city focused on the daughter they'd thrown away. That evening, alone in my penthouse, I finally listened to the voicemails that had accumulated over the week. The evolution was fascinating. Monday's confusion had given way to Tuesday's anger, Wednesday's threats, Thursday's bargaining, and Friday's desperation. The 5 stages of grief played out in digital format, though they seemed stuck on anger and bargaining with no sign of acceptance. The final message was from Michael, left an hour ago. His voice was different, stripped of its usual arrogance. Natasha, I don't know what to say. Everything's falling apart. The hospital, Victoria's career, Mom and Dad are shells of themselves. I know we hurt you. I know we were wrong. But this is destroying us. Please. Whatever you want, an apology, money, anything. Just please stop this. We're your family. I deleted the message without response. They'd had years to treat me like family. They'd had a week to offer genuine apologies without conditions. Instead, they'd tried manipulation, threats, and public relations. Only now, when consequences reached their door, did they remember family bonds. The lesson was too little, too late. Tomorrow night, the city's elite would gather to celebrate philanthropy and success. They'd toast a young entrepreneur who'd overcome adversity to build an empire. And somewhere outside, a family who'd bet everything on their daughter's failure would learn the cost of that wager. The house always wins, and I'd built the house while they weren't watching. Tomorrow, everyone would see what they'd missed. Sunday evening descended on the city like a benediction, streetlights creating halos in the light snowfall that had begun an hour earlier. The riverside ballroom glowed against the winter darkness, its windows casting golden rectangles onto the fresh powder accumulating on the ground. A red carpet ran from the valet station to the entrance, protected by a pristine white canopy. Everything was perfect, as if nature itself had decided to provide the ideal backdrop for my revelation. I arrived at 7 sharp, 30 minutes before the official start time. The valet who took my keys did a double take at the Bentley, a far cry from the battered Honda they'd seen in the Forbes article. I'd chosen my entrance carefully, wanting to be in position before the guests arrived, before the media frenzy began, before my family made whatever desperate play they'd undoubtedly planned. Diane met me at the entrance, her professional calm not quite hiding her excitement. "Darling, you look absolutely stunning. That gown is perfection." I'd chosen a midnight blue Valentino that cost more than most people's cars, paired with the kind of understated jewelry that whispered rather than shouted its value. Tonight wasn't about flaunting wealth, it was about revealing truth. Inside, the transformation was complete. The ballroom sparkled with thousands of tiny lights creating a constellation effect across the ceiling. Ice sculptures of eagles in flight anchored each corner, representing the veterans we were here to honor. The stage was set with military precision, a podium waiting for the speech that would change everything. Round tables for 10 filled the floor, each with a small American flag centerpiece surrounded by white roses. Table 1, directly in front of the stage, bore a discreet card reading Family of Honor. It would remain empty all night, a ghost table that would speak louder than any occupied seat. The staff briefing was brief but crucial. Security had photos of my family members with strict instructions to politely but firmly refuse entry. The media had been given specific guidelines about coverage areas. Everything was choreographed down to the minute. This wasn't just a charity gala, it was theater, and I was both director and star. By 7:25, the early arrivals began flowing in. The mayor came first, making a point of beating the crowd to have a private word. He'd known my father from various city functions, had heard the stories about the disappointing daughter. His handshake was firm, his apology sincere. "We should have looked deeper," he said simply. I appreciated his honesty. Dr. Patricia Thornton, chair of the hospital board, arrived with a delegation of board members. She'd been copied on Michael's LinkedIn post, had liked it without thought. Now her eyes held questions and calculations as she assessed the woman who could buy and sell her hospital without blinking. She murmured something about misunderstandings and fresh starts. I smiled and said nothing. The country clubs had arrived en masse, clearly having coordinated their entrance. These were my parents' peers, the audience for their performance of successful parenting. Now they flocked to me with the shameless enthusiasm of people who worship success regardless of its source. Mrs. Henderson, who'd supposedly seen me at the food bank, gushed about always knowing I was destined for greatness. Mr. Morrison, Derek's father, distanced himself from his son's gossip with surgical precision. The hypocrisy was thick enough to choke on, but I smiled and played gracious hostess. By 8 o'clock, the ballroom was packed. 400 of the city's most influential citizens, all here to support veterans and, more honestly, to satisfy their curiosity about the mysterious millionaire. The empty family table drew stares and whispers. Everyone knew who should be sitting there, and their absence was a statement louder than any speech. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I caught a glimpse of the scene outside. Security was turning away a familiar group at the entrance. My family had come dressed in their finest, assuming their name would grant entry. Dad's face was purple with indignation as he gestured wildly at the security chief. Mom clutched her pearls, literally, as she pleaded with anyone who'd listen. Michael and Victoria hung back, his arm around her shoulders as she sobbed. Derek and Carol huddled together, probably already spinning this into their next gossip opportunity. The media captured every moment. The contrast between the elegant gala inside and the desperate family outside was editorial gold. Someone had clearly tipped off the photographers about the drama unfolding at the entrance. Flashes lit up the night as my family realized their exclusion was being documented for tomorrow's headlines. They retreated to the parking lot, but didn't leave. They stood in the snow, designer shoes ruined, watching through windows they couldn't enter. Ghosts at their own feast. At 8:30, I took the stage to warm applause that grew into a standing ovation. The Forbes article had done its work, everyone knew my story, or thought they did. I stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces, finding familiar ones from my parents' social circle in the crowd. Many had the grace to look uncomfortable, remembering their own participation in the Sterling family narrative about their problem child. "Good evening," I began, my voice steady and clear through the sound system. "Thank you all for joining me tonight to support our veterans who've given so much for our freedom. As someone who was recently told to go live in the streets, I have a profound appreciation for those who actually have no choice in their circumstances." A ripple went through the crowd. Those who'd missed the social media drama leaned in, sensing story. Others shifted uneasily, remembering their own comments on those viral posts. I let the moment breathe before continuing. 3 weeks ago, my family threw me out of their home on Thanksgiving, convinced I was unemployed, homeless, and suffering from a gambling addiction. These assumptions were based on seeing me at a casino restaurant meeting investors, at the unemployment office recruiting veterans, and at a food bank where I volunteer. They never asked for explanations. They never sought truth. They simply constructed a narrative that fit their preconceptions and broadcast it to the world. Through the windows, I could see my family pressed against the glass like children at a candy store. Mom had her hand over her mouth. Dad stood rigid as a statue. The snow continued to fall, dusting their shoulders with white, making them look like a tragic Christmas card. "But I'm not here to dwell on the past," I continued, shifting the narrative. "I'm here because success means nothing if it's not shared. The $5 million we're raising tonight will provide housing, job training, and support services for veterans in need. People who actually are struggling, who actually do need help, who deserve better than assumptions and judgments." I spoke for 20 minutes about the programs we'd fund, the lives we'd change, the futures we'd create. Never once did I mention my family by name, but their story wove through every word. The audience hung on each sentence, many glancing toward the windows where the Sterling family vigil continued. When I announced that I would personally match every donation dollar for dollar, the applause was deafening. "I learned something important these past 3 weeks," I concluded, allowing emotion to enter my voice for the first time. "Family isn't about blood. It's about who stands by you when you're climbing mountains, not just when you're standing on the summit. It's about who believes in your dreams when they're still just sketches on napkins. Tonight, in this room, supporting this cause, I see my true family." The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. People wiped tears, whether from genuine emotion or calculated performance, I neither knew nor cared. The message had been delivered. The contrast had been drawn. Inside, warmth and celebration and generosity. Outside, cold and exclusion and consequence. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations, donations, and strategic conversations. Business cards changed hands with promises of future meetings. Potential partnerships were discussed over champagne and canapés. The veterans present, guests of honor at every table, shared stories that put my family drama in perspective. These were people who'd faced real challenges, overcome real obstacles, deserved real support. By 11 o'clock, we'd raised $8 million for the cause. With my matching funds, that meant $16 million for veteran services. Diane whispered that it was the most successful charity gala in the city's history. The media would have their headlines for days. But through it all, I remained aware of the vigil outside, my family standing in the snow, watching their daughters triumph from behind glass they couldn't breach. As the evening wound down, I made my way to the windows, standing where they could see me clearly. Our eyes met across the divide, inside and outside, warm and cold, chosen and blood. I raised my champagne glass in a mock toast, the gesture deliberate and final. Then I turned my back and walked away, leaving them to their snow-covered shame. Security reported they stayed until the last guest departed, until the lights dimmed and the staff began cleanup. 5 hours in the snow, watching a world that had closed its doors to them as firmly as they'd once closed theirs to me. When they finally left, they walked to their cars like refugees from a war they'd started but couldn't win. The gala was over, but its echoes would resonate for years. In one evening, I'd raised millions for those in need while showing those who'd claimed to love me the cost of conditional affection. The daughter they'd thrown to the streets had built a palace there. The failure they'd mocked had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. The family they'd publicly disowned had been privately replaced by hundreds who valued achievement over blood, character over connection. As I rode home in the back of my town car, snow still falling on empty streets, I thought about the veterans who'd have homes because of tonight. I thought about the young entrepreneurs who'd seen that success was possible despite family doubt. I thought about everyone who'd ever been told they weren't enough, finding proof that they were everything. And yes, I thought about my family, standing in the snow, finally understanding what they'd thrown away. But mostly, I thought about tomorrow, about the future I'd build with people who saw my worth when it wasn't yet worth millions. That was the real fortune, the one no amount of money could buy. Knowing who truly belonged in your life and having the strength to lock out those who didn't, no matter what genes you shared. The morning after the gala dawned bright and cold, the city covered in a pristine blanket of snow that made everything look new and clean. I woke naturally, no alarm needed, and padded to my kitchen to make coffee. Through my penthouse windows, the sunrise painted the skyline in shades of rose and gold. It was the kind of morning that promised fresh starts and new beginnings, which seemed fitting given what was about to unfold. The newspapers had been delivered, their headlines everything I'd anticipated and more. Sterling's golden night, millionaire raises record funds while family left in cold. The photos were devastating in their clarity, inside, warmth and glamour and generosity, outside, my family pressed against windows like Dickensian orphans. One particularly striking image showed me raising my champagne glass while they stood in the snow behind me. The visual metaphor wrote itself. My phone had been silent all night, a blessed reprieve from the week of constant calls and messages. But as I scrolled through my emails, I found something unexpected, a message from Michael sent at 3 a.m. Not a text or voicemail, but a formal email, as if the gravity of the situation required more than casual communication. Natasha, it began, I've been standing in the snow for 5 hours, and I've had time to think. To really think, maybe for the first time in years. I watched you on that stage, poised and powerful and generous, and I realized I don't know you at all. The sister I thought I knew was a fiction we created because it made us feel superior. The real you was there all along, building something incredible while we built walls to keep you out. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not sure I deserve it. I'm definitely not asking for money or connections or any of the things Dad keeps muttering about deserving. I'm just asking for the chance to know my actual sister, not the convenient fiction we preferred. Victoria and I are separating. The hospital has placed me on review. My life is in shambles, and it's entirely self-inflicted. But maybe that's what I needed to finally see clearly. I'm sorry. Not sorry you're successful, not sorry we were caught, not sorry for the consequences. Just sorry. Sorry for every time I let Mom and Dad's narrative override my own observations. Sorry for the LinkedIn post. Sorry for being a terrible brother. If you never speak to me again, I understand. But I wanted you to know that at least one person in our family finally sees you. Really sees you. And what I see is magnificent. I set the phone down, surprised to find my hands trembling slightly. Of all the responses I'd anticipated, genuine self-reflection from Michael hadn't been among them. I made a mental note to have Elizabeth review it, make sure it wasn't some legal maneuver, but something in its 3 a.m. honesty rang true. The rest of the morning brought a parade of revelations. The gossip blogs had done their work overnight, piecing together every element of the story. Someone had leaked security footage of my parents being turned away from the gala, their entitled demands and eventual defeat playing out in grainy black and white. Victoria's infamous livestream had been edited with clips from the gala, the contrast between her cruel commentary and my philanthropic success creating a narrative about karma that the internet devoured. By noon, Aunt Carol had listed her house. The real estate community was small, and word traveled fast about agents who spread false rumors about clients' families. Derek's law firm had made their decision. He was terminated for conduct detrimental to the firm's reputation. His very public speculation about my supposed legal troubles had backfired spectacularly when contrasted with my actual legal success. My parents, predictably, took the opposite approach from Michael. They released another statement through their lawyer, threatening legal action for defamation, emotional distress, and something called filial abandonment, which Elizabeth found hilarious. "They're actually trying to sue you for not being a good daughter after they literally threw you out," she laughed during our afternoon call. "I almost want them to file just so I can destroy them in court." But the lawsuits never materialized. By Tuesday, reality had set in. Dad was asked to take early retirement from his consulting work with the factory, the new owners, my shell company, citing philosophical differences. Mom's social groups distanced themselves, the country club revoking their membership after reviewing community standards. Their carefully constructed life, built on reputation and appearances, crumbled as thoroughly as they'd tried to crumble mine. That's when I made my move. Through another shell company, I purchased their mortgage from the bank. They'd refinanced repeatedly over the years, borrowing against equity to maintain a lifestyle slightly above their means, to keep up with neighbors they wanted to impress. The house was leveraged to the hilt, and with their income streams drying up, foreclosure loomed. I had my property manager contact them with an offer. They could stay in the house as renters, paying a fair market rate that was actually below their current mortgage payment. The lease terms were generous, the rent stable, the option to remain in their home preserved. But they would be tenants in a house owned by the daughter they'd discarded. Every month, they'd write a check knowing where it went. The poetry of it satisfied something deep in my soul. They signed the lease within a week. What choice did they have? The veterans programs launched with remarkable speed. The old factory became a beacon of hope, its renovation creating jobs while its future purpose promised to create futures. Young people from the neighborhood, kids who reminded me of myself at that age, began applying for the coding boot camps and entrepreneurship programs. I made sure to review every application personally, looking for the ones whose families didn't believe in them, whose dreams were deemed impractical, whose potential was invisible to those who should have nurtured it. One application particularly caught my attention. Jasmine Williams, 17, living with her grandmother after her parents kicked her out for refusing to give up her unrealistic tech ambitions. Her essay about building apps in the public library because she had no computer at home made my throat tight with recognition. I approved her application and made a note to ensure she received not just training but mentorship, equipment, and the kind of support I'd never had. The healing journey wasn't immediate or easy. Success might be the best revenge, but it doesn't erase the scars of rejection. I found myself in therapy, finally addressing years of internalized criticism, of dimming my light to avoid outshining the family sun. Dr. Martinez, recommended by a founder friend who'd faced similar family trauma, helped me understand that my drive for success had been both despite and because of my family's treatment. The chip on my shoulder had been rocket fuel, but now I needed to learn to fly without it. "You built an empire to prove them wrong," she observed during one session. "What will you build now that you've proven them right about being wrong?" It was a good question. The answer came slowly, in pieces. I built connections with other entrepreneurs who'd been family black sheep. We formed an informal support group, meeting monthly to share stories and strategies. I built a chosen family of mentors, peers, and eventually, protégés who valued growth over conformity. I built a life where success was shared rather than hoarded, where achievement was celebrated rather than diminished. A year later, I received another email from Michael. He divorced Victoria, completed his review period, and returned to medicine with what he called actual humility. He was volunteering at free clinics, using his skills for those who couldn't afford his previous rates. He asked for nothing, expected nothing, just wanted me to know he was trying to become someone worth knowing. I met him for coffee on a snowy afternoon that reminded me of the gala night. He looked older, worn down by consequences, but somehow more real than the polished prince I'd grown up with. We talked for 3 hours about everything except our parents, and for the first time in our lives, I glimpsed the brother he might have been if our family hadn't been so invested in their toxic dynamics. I drive by the incubator sometimes, he admitted near the end. Seeing those kids going in, knowing what you're giving them. I'm proud of you, Natasha. I know I have no right to be, but I am. I didn't offer forgiveness that day. Trust, once shattered, requires more than coffee and contrition to rebuild. But I offered something else, the possibility of a future where we might know each other as individuals rather than roles in our parents' play. It was more than I'd thought possible and less than he probably hoped, but it was honest. The Sterling Hope Foundation grew beyond my wildest dreams. That first gala raised $16 million, by the second year, we'd tripled that. Veterans found homes, jobs, purpose. Young entrepreneurs found support, guidance, belief. The ripple effect spread through the city, each success story creating others, each person helped becoming someone who could help another. I kept tabs on my parents, though we never spoke. They paid their rent punctually, maintained the house well, lived quietly in the home where they'd raised me to believe I wasn't enough. Neighbors reported they'd aged rapidly, the weight of their choices etching lines on faces that had once beamed with false pride. They'd gotten what they'd always wanted, a consistent, stable living situation. It just came from the daughter they'd thrown away rather than the son they'd treasured. 5 years after that Thanksgiving night, I received a package with no return address. Inside was my grandmother's jewelry box, the one that should have been mine as the eldest grandchild, and a letter in my mother's careful handwriting. Natasha, we were wrong. Not just about your success, but about what success means. We measured worth in degrees and traditional jobs and missed the actual value standing in front of us. Your father has Parkinson's now, mild but progressing. I spend my days caring for him and thinking about the years we wasted on pride and prejudice. We don't expect forgiveness. We don't deserve it. But I wanted you to have what was always yours by right, even if we were too blind to see it. The jewelry and the apology, both too little and too late, but sincere. Mom. I held the jewelry box, remembering my grandmother who'd died when I was 12. She'd been an entrepreneur herself, running a small bakery in an era when women didn't do such things. I wondered what she would have thought of her family's treatment of me. I wondered if she would have been proud of what I'd built from the ashes of their rejection. I kept the jewelry but didn't respond to the letter. Some bridges, once burned, are better left as ash. But I did something else. I increased the programs at the incubator to include elder care technology, knowing that somewhere in the city, an old man with trembling hands might benefit from innovations created by the grandchildren of those he deemed worthless. Looking back now, from the vantage point of a decade, I see that Thanksgiving night as the greatest gift my family ever gave me. Not the rejection itself, but the freedom it created. They showed me who they really were, and in doing so, freed me to become who I really was. Their cruelty stripped away illusions I'd clung to about love being unconditional, about family being forever, about blood being thicker than water. Water, it turns out, flows where it's welcome. It finds its own level. It carves channels through the hardest stone given time and persistence. Blood just clots and stains and holds you back. I chose water, chose flow, chose the family that formed around shared values rather than shared DNA. Today, when young entrepreneurs come to me with stories of unsupportive families, of parents who don't understand, of siblings who mock their dreams, I tell them this: the best revenge isn't just success. It's building a life so full of purpose and connection and joy that the people who rejected you become footnotes in your story rather than main characters. It's using the fuel of their doubt to rocket past their limitations. It's creating a chosen family that celebrates your victories and cushions your defeats without keeping score. To those watching who've been told they'll never be enough, you are already enough. Your worth isn't determined by those who refuse to see it. Your dreams aren't limited by those who lack imagination. Your future isn't defined by those who cling to the past. Sometimes the greatest gift toxic people can give you is their absence. Sometimes the highest wall they build becomes the foundation for your castle. I want to hear from you. What's your story of rising above family doubt? Drop it in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear that success is possible despite the naysayers. Subscribe for more stories about turning pain into power, rejection into rocket fuel, and wounds into wisdom. And to everyone spending this holiday season estranged from blood relatives but surrounded by chosen family, you're not alone. You're not broken. You're not less than. You're free. And from that freedom, anything is possible. The streets they tell you to live in might just be the foundation for your empire. Build it tall. Build it proud. Build it without apology. Thank you for joining me on this journey from rejection to triumph. Until next time, remember, the best chapter of your life might begin the day they close the book on you.